Hello and welcome to the History of Aviation podcast for this episode number 63. And we are going to dive right into it. I'm joined by three great guys here for this episode, starting with Mr. David Rowe. You got the weather going on there, David.
Yes, sir. We certainly had some weather here. The hurricane Helene came through very close to me. Elizabethton and Unicoi County, Irwin, got hit very, very hard. Some places that I know very well, have grown up around, driven through, driven in, played ball at. They got some massive damage. I work at Bristol Motor Speedway, and we are a central point for dropping off of supplies to be sent to these folks that have been, you know, impacted by the hurricane. So I've been just covered up with that. In a related aviation note, there's a ton of Blackhawks and Chinooks that are flying in and out of Tri-Cities Airport, Elizabethton Airport. It's a really busy place here as, supplies are being moved in and out to get to these folks that were, affected by this hurricane. So thoughts and prayers to them because they're having tough
Yes,
times out there. But we're hanging in and we're getting things done and trying to help where we can.
perfect. I'm also joined by Mr. Julien Martinson. How you been doing, Julien? You told me earlier you just started on your second book.
Oh, that's correct. I started on my second book. It's in the final phases of editing, and I'm working on the book cover. So the title of the book is called Mediocrity is Killing Your Superpower, which is based on the TED Talk that I did last year in Harare, Zimbabwe. And it's about goal setting and following role models and inspiring other people, and then we look closely at SMS, for an example, safety management systems. In aviation, not everything goes as planned. And so sometimes there are hiccups. And then there's a study called SMS on how to analyze accidents, so how to recover from that. And so that type of analysis we can also apply to our personal lives in different areas. For an example, if you're following a diet, and you miss your goals, how do you recover out of that? And so the book answers questions like that, which can be also applied to academics or fitness or your career goals. So
Everyday
I'm really
life. Yeah.
excited with launching that book.
Great. That is awesome, Julian. And we'll talk about your other book here towards the end of the show, but we're also joined by Mr. Dave Gorman. What's going on, Dave?
Hey everybody, good to see you again. And just want to second what David had to say. Our friends and neighbors who've been
Mm-hmm.
so devastated and need help, and as usual, people are rallying across the miles to get much needed supplies to folks, and they need everything. And I really really am always impressed with the response of people to help out and support. This was very unexpected and life changer. As David said, the helicopters and everything that are going up and delivering supplies or plucking people out of the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I have some friends who actually had to be rescued by helicopter. Um, that was something that happened with them. So it's just really, really tough. And thanks to all the volunteers, all the folks who are contributing. That's awesome.
Definitely.
I did have a chance not too long ago to go up to Morristown for the fly-in for the EAA Chapter 1494, their annual fly-in. I have a dog growling a bit in the background. She's quite
Uh-oh.
happy to be here too. Just found her favorite bone. Unfortunately, it's not my leg, so that's good.
Yes.
But anyways, back to the fly-in. It was always great to get up there. They had a good crowd and had uh, the old DC-3 up there, and they had a P-51 come in and taking off and appearing and everything. That was really, really cool. So always good to get up there and see some local aircraft. And certainly the way things changed just a week later was pretty devastating. But
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks ago, we just were not a care in the world looking up at the sky, you know?
That's how things change, quickly.
Yes.
Got to just, be prepared.
Absolutely. Well, I think I suggested our topic tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And Derrick, did you say this is episode 63?
63.
Holy smokes, how about that? Um, I suggested this a few weeks ago, and just because of schedules and things, we weren't able to get to it right away. But this is a an aircraft that had a brief shining moment, and not just when they were being shot down, but this aircraft served the Japanese Navy, uh, and it was the Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber, a twin-engine bomber that served as assault weapon from the skies, an aerial torpedo bomber, things like that. Um, Kind of a nasty array of weapons sticking out the back end of it as well. And it really was kind of a fearsome thing at first, like a lot of early Japanese efforts and things that they didn't really improve a whole lot over the war. Not well armored. So, once we figured out the best way to attack it, we did a whole lot better against these things. But we're going to talk about the Betty Bomber.
Yes, I would almost say it's almost as famous as the Zero. Both Mitsubishi products, they came out of the same design studios, and are when you think of the Japanese aviation, the Zero and the Betty are probably the first two aircraft that you're going to talk about. It's made a name for itself, and unfortunately, some of the names are a bit derogatory, as you mentioned. But you know the requirements for the plane were such that they had to build it without the armor and the protection that Americans take for granted. We're going to have armor plating, we're going to have armored glass, and a cockpit with self-sealing tanks in the wings. These are all things that the Japanese designers decided weren't necessary for this aircraft, because what was necessary was extreme long range and a heavy bomb load. And the people on board were of less importance to them. It was more about
Well,
getting the job done.
and altitude was important too, but this was not a
Yes.
pressurized aircraft, I don't think, was it?
No, it was not.
Especially when it got shot full of a couple of bullet holes. But yeah, those were the specifications, and the need for that was recognized kind of early on, and so they had some earlier bombers that were serving without much distinction. They had some problems. The Betty was definitely a step up in technology and as you said, payload and range and things like that. But ultimately, it was no match for the Allied war effort. It served in a lot of roles, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Bombing, transportation. I mean, if you look at the aircraft, it's not your typical World War II design. It's not tapered. It's not slim. It's kind of fat and round. As a matter of fact, the Japanese referred to it as a hamaki, which means cigar or a leaf roll. So if you look at it, it does sort of look like a big cigar flying. But it suited their purposes. They could put a lot of people in it. They could put a
Yeah.
lot of weight in it to fly out a long distance, and it did exactly that.
Well, one of the key features that I really appreciate about this aircraft, the Betty bomber, was it was fast for its time, and its top speed was 265 miles per hour. That's 428 kilometers, making it difficult for early allies to fighters to intercept. And the range of this aircraft features an exceptional range of over 3,000 miles. So it really could go the distance. That's equal to 4,800 kilometers. And this allowed the Japanese to project its power across a vast distance over the Pacific, which gave it its strength. And it was armed with torpedoes and bombs, and the Betty bomber was particularly feared by naval forces. So the design was equipped with the large fuel tanks, which increased its range, and its design choice led to a significant drawback. The plane became highly flammable and vulnerable to enemy fire, earning the name the Flying Lighter. So due to its tendency to catch fire when it hit the ground.
Oops. Well,
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
good.
so typical to a cigar. Something
Oh,
goes up in smoke.
Well, that's the thing is they built it with what they call a wet wing. So all the fuel is inside the wing. And on an American aircraft, they would put a bulletproof rubber encasing inside the tank. So when a bullet passed through, it would seal up and wouldn't leak. But that adds, 500-600 pounds per tank. And that's weight. That means distance is reduced. That means your speed is reduced. Those were all things that the Japanese didn't want. So that was left out. And that's why when you put a bullet through the tank, it caught on fire because there was nothing to protect it.
I kind of felt like reading about some of the ways that this aircraft was used, that some of the protection was just strength in numbers. I mean, they had fighter escort and they might send up 100 Bettys at a time, things like that. And with the idea that, well, you might get 20 of them or 30 of them, but hey, 60 of them get, and that's a crazy way to fight a war
That's
of
yeah.
attrition. But
Well,
that,
that sounds a little bit similar to how the Allies, the Americans, started with the B-17. We went
yeah,
over there
Yeah.
thinking we were just going to punch through with a bunch of planes and hit our target. And then the reality comes in, and you can't do that. The technology, the fighters are too good. And that's what the Japanese discovered when they had air supremacy in China in the early years of the Pacific War and World War II. They could do that. Their Zeros could come out and protect them. But as soon as we started putting up the air defense, the vulnerabilities of the Betty became very apparent very fast.
Well, you hit a couple of nails right on the head. So we talked about the flaws, the lack of armor, the fuel tanks. However, we didn't discuss yet the combat performance as Allied forces improved the aircraft and anti-aircraft capabilities. The Betty bomber became an easy target, suffering heavy losses. And by the mid 1943, the aircraft's operational effectiveness had dramatically decreased. And so, like with all things, there is its pros and the cons with any given aircraft. So that's all I have to have for the flaws of the aircraft. But I don't know if you have any of the success stories or their achievements.
Well, yeah, they're in the beginning, in the early 40s, this aircraft was the first one to sink two British warships that pretty much put the British out of the Pacific War. There was some definite success there. They sank the Betty bombers sank the HMS Prince of Wales and the HMS Repulse on the 10th of December in 1941. So this was immediately after Pearl Harbor. The British just didn't believe that the aircraft would be that deadly, and they went out. And the Betty bombers proved that they were capable torpedo aircraft. The other thing is if you know your Pearl Harbor history, the Japanese had a very, very good torpedo. I believe it was called the Type. What was it? 41. Either way, their torpedo was the best in the world. It was very capable. It ran fast. It ran not very deep, and the British ships, I think I read, were one of them. Maybe the Prince of Wales took 20 torpedoes. So these Betty bombers were accurate. The pilots were good, well trained. And again, there's no fighter cover, so they were able to get in and take out the British Navy in one day.
yeah, I would call that a success. That's for sure when you think about it. Also, this aircraft was not it really wasn't a pre-war design. I mean, it was in the fact that it came online in 41 before Pearl Harbor, but you think sometimes about proving grounds. The German Air Force and Luftwaffe was testing their weapons over Spain,
Yes.
and China was a testing ground for a lot of Japanese tactics and air power demonstrations and things like that. But the Betty was kind of late in its development. I thought in terms of when it became active.
Yes, you're correct. It did. It was like in 1938, 39 is when it was designed and being built. And it actually went into operational September the 13th of 1940 was when it was first used. So literally right before the start of World War II for the United States. But interesting, you were talking about it. The design of this Betty aircraft was by a gentleman by the name of Joji Hattori, and he had a designer named Kiro Honjo. And this Honjo designer had actually studied bomber design at the Junkers factory in Germany. So he had some German engineering experience in his toolbox, and he brought that to the design of this aircraft, which is one of the reasons why it was successful, is because he was able to combine the Japanese and the German philosophies and create a pretty sharp airplane.
Well, and to what Julien, what you had said earlier, it really was advanced for its time, but then it was surpassed, and the it really had its best days by like 44. It was all over, right? It was they weren't improving it, and it was being surpassed by newer, updated Allied aircraft.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I would say by 42. From what I was reading, by the time the Battle of Guadalcanal started, that was the end of the Betty's dominance in the skies. When it went up against the Wildcats, and they were taking them out of the sky pretty easily. What was it here? August of 1942, the Marines landed on Guadalcanal, and there were torpedo G4M1s, Bettys, attacking. 18 were shot down by anti-aircraft fire and F4F fighters. That's 120 aviators they lost on that one attack. And if you know your Japanese history, they lost a lot of their best trained crews early in the war, and they were never replenished them with well trained crews. So that's by 42 the Betty had reached its peak.
But really appreciate your opinions and your knowledge. But what are some of the lessons that we can learn from the Mitsubishi Betty bomber? So the legacy of the Betty bomber provides several key insights for the aviation and military history, which includes the balance between innovation and practicality. The Betty's bomber impressive range and speed were revolutionary for its time. However, the decision to sacrifice armor for extended range proved fatal. And so this is a key element that we can even learn from today in making our choices. The modern aircraft design emphasizes the balance between offensive capability, protection, and survivability. And it also incorporated technological evolution. So these challenges faced by the Betty bomber led to the advancement of aircraft design post-war, particularly in areas of fuel tank protection for defensive armaments. And these innovations continue to influence the development of military aircraft even today. So even though the mistakes of the past, even though today we can still apply them and learn how to become more efficient in what we do.
Well,
Do you
and
guys have any comments?
go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I mean that's true of all aircraft. I mean everything is a building block. You're building on the knowledge of what works and what doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we're going to discard it, move over to what does work. And the fact that they sacrificed protection for distance and capacity, that is one way to do it, but that's just you're sacrificing people, and that's ultimately not the way to go. You want to protect your people. You want your aviators to return to do their job again tomorrow. And so every country has its own design philosophy, and so the Japanese, as I keep saying, they're a little bit different thinking than the Americans or the British or the Allies. They are very honor bound, and for them to die was an honor, and so it's not as a terrible thing as it is to an American audience.
What I was going to say is working in the car rental industry as long as I have, you know what I think of when I think of Mitsubishi, the car.
Parts.
Of course, you know we have the what is it that flies around here that kind of replaced the Mad Dogs, the CJ,
CRJ.
CRJs.
the
Yeah.
CRJs. Yeah, I don't know much about Mitsubishi at all except for the car. What is the tie with the? Is it the same company that makes the car?
Yeah, it's all Mitsubishi is the same company. They are a gigantic conglomerate in Japan. They make cars. I believe they do ships, aircraft. I mean, motorcycles. They are
Oh
just
wow,
if it's
yeah,
got a motor in it, they build it, and they are a
okay.
massive worldwide company.
I was wanting, I was thinking about the early use of this aircraft and how, as we've said, revolutionary range, payload, torpedo bomber, low level torpedo bomber too. I mean, there's some pictures of these just skimming over the waves and everything, and that's sounds exciting, but it's going to be kind of terrifying when you're getting fired upon as well.
Yes.
Um, but towards the end of the war, it was carrying Oka suicide bombers up into attack positions. And I thought, that really is, as the course of the war, as the push for the war developed and changed, as the Allies were pushing back and taking Iwo Jima and forcing them back closer to the home islands and everything. It didn't really reach its potential. It had been surpassed, as you said, Dave.
Yeah, and that's the nature of wartime production, and the designers
Yeah.
are always reaching for that next thing. What's the next thing that's going to give us this primacy? And again, this was built in 38, 39, went into service in 1940. So naturally, by 44, it's outclassed. It's still useful. It still did its job. It was used from the first day of the war to the end of the war. As a matter of fact, we can talk about the surrender party that flew on the Bettys to meet with the Allies. But it was a good, solid aircraft that did its job. It's just like everything else, it gets run over by the newer machines that come online.
Works. I was also interested in, Julie and one of my favorite aircraft is the Mosquito, but there were also bow fighters in that theater of operations as well. Twin engine, similar size, perhaps aircraft. I guess the Betty, was it four crew members, Dave?
It started out with seven, and they reduced that down to five.
Okay, to five. So, a little bit bigger, obviously, than the crew of a Mosquito or a bow fighter. Mitchell, obviously, is a little bit maybe more apt comparison, but I didn't see, other than Lightnings, a lot of twin versus twin type aerial combat going on. Have you heard of any of that? Julian, any awareness of that with maybe Mosquitoes versus Bettys or bow fighters versus Bettys? I hadn't,
No, not on the top of my head.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the
Just
obviously
thinking
the
about
the
similar type of aircraft going up against each other, because I mean a swift single engine fighter, that's got a big engine in front of it is going to have the ability to overtake a slower twin like this.
Yeah, the P-38 is the only twin that I read that it went up against, and uh, so I don't know if the Mitchells in the Pacific, they were low level bombing ships and stuff. So I don't know if they crossed paths or not. I have not read
Yeah,
anything about that.
look into that. Well, and of course we have to talk about the very famous interception of a Betty, a couple of Bettys, but by P-38s, right?
That is correct. Admiral Yamamoto, when we broke their code and could read their messages, we discovered that there was going to be a tour of bases by Admiral Yamamoto. And we sent out a flight of 16 P-38s to intercept it over where was that in? Was it Bougainville? Is that where that
Yes.
happened? I think it was Bougainville, and precision flight by the P-38s to get there at the same time as the Yamamoto's Betty, and they shot him down and killed him. There was a second one that had a chief of staff, vice admiral Matome Yugagi, and he was shot down, but he survived. So it was a very successful, event for the Allies. We eliminated one of the main generals of the Japanese Imperial Navy, which, to be honest, from what I've read, the Betty was actually one is credited to Yamamoto. It was an idea that he wanted an aircraft that had these long legs. One of the things he said was you could buy 1,000 airplanes for the cost of a warship. So he was always aviation minded. And, when they lost him, they lost a great resource in their battle against the Allies.
I think I had heard a story that the Allies who planned that raid and carried it out had to make it look like it was an accidental interception because they didn't want to give away that we had their code. Does that sound familiar?
I have read something along those lines. Is that they didn't want it to make it obvious that we were listening in and knew, but
Yeah.
we did.
Well, I also was did not realize until I was reading up a little bit before the episode that the that mission occurred a year to the day after the Doolittle raid. So
Hmm.
also on April 18th. So
Wow, I did not realize that.
yeah,
You're right.
no, sure
That's
did.
pretty amazing. But yeah,
Where can we see a Betty these days, gentlemen?
uh, that is a hard thing to accomplish because there's literally none left. Pieces, parts. The most complete one that I read was at Plains of Fame Air Museum in Chino, California. But it is a derelict wreck. It is not put together. It's not complete, but it's the most complete one, and it's in a diorama that they've got there. Apparently, there are some. Where is it? The Solomon Islands War Museum has one on display with a tail section. There's a restored fuselage that the Yamashini Prefecture, Japan, and I'm going to butcher this name, Kawagachiko Motor Museum. They have actually built the fuselage and restored it. It doesn't have wings. It doesn't have engines. I don't know if it even has a tail, but it looks beautiful. I saw a picture of it. So there's one in Japan that you can see. The Smithsonian Institution has a forward fuselage, and this was one of the flight test planes that was brought back to the Americas. Apparently, at some point, somebody took a blowtorch to it and scrapped the back of half of the airplane. So there is one at the Smithsonian. And if you want to, you can go to Bougainville Island and visit the crash site of Admiral Yamamoto's Betty plane. It's still in place from where it crash landed. So you can see it there. But there are none flying and there are none complete that you can see as of today.
Well, it's interesting to note that Mitsubishi produced a total of 2,414 of these aircraft. And according to Aviation Central, the National Air and Space Museum has a Model 334 Betty. While it's not complete, it's the best preserved example of the aircraft. So you can head down to that museum and have a look at this aircraft.
Awesome. David Rowe, you always have some factoids for us towards the end of the show. What do you got for us?
Oh, well, here's an interesting one. So this was a wild idea that the Japanese had. They wanted to, I call this commando Betties. That was the easiest way I could describe it. So they wanted to create a fleet of Betties with some 60 troops that they were going to fly to Guam, Saipan, and Tinian that would disgorge hundreds of commandos dressed as Army Air Force soldiers, and they were there to destroy as many B-29s as possible, then head into the jungles and become guerrilla fighters. And then, yeah, exactly. Never heard of this. One of those crews was supposed to steal a super fortress and fly it back. This was just a wild idea that they were in the planning stages for. And it never happened because there was an atomic bomb that put an end to the war, thankfully. But they were trying to use the Betty to infiltrate these islands to the air bases, which I thought was just, an amazing thing. But yeah, Commando Bettys. And that's pretty crazy. Another thing that I read about them, originally, the Betty is based off of the Nell, which is a G4M, the Nell, which was a previous version. So they actually wanted to turn the Betty into like a convoy fighter, that it would fly with the other Betty bombers, and it would be a gunship that sat on the outsides of the force. This was similar to what we tried to do with some B-17s later in the war, where you just put a whole bunch of guns in it and it would fly along and just be a battleship in the sky to shoot down all the enemy aircraft. But apparently that idea did not work very well, and that was scrapped pretty quickly as well. I believe that was called the G6M version of the Betty. And so there's a couple of some things that you may or may not know about the Betty.
I like it. And I know you've been real busy with the weather and everything else, David, but what do you got going on over at Aerophile for us that we can be looking ahead to?
Well, I have just finished. We just finished the NASCAR race, so we had a flyover. The Arkansas Air National Guard brought a C-130 Hercules in, did a really sharp flyover. Got some video of that that's on my Aerophile YouTube channel. So go check that out. That's out now. And coming up tomorrow evening, I have my video from my trip to Virginia Beach, and the Italian demonstration team, the Tricolore video, will be out. So you can start. I've got about 4 videos in a row from that air show. So my Virginia Beach air show is coming up on aerophile.com and my YouTube channel. So please go check it out.
We've been waiting on that, and you can get Aerophile through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well.
Yes, all social media. I'm out there. Come see me.
Perfect. And
Julien, he's worldwide.
He's worldwide.
He's worldwide.
Like
he's got viewers from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, I do. You'd be surprised the number of comments I get from like the Philippines and places like that, and it's like I've got to translate what they're saying.
Well, it's usually some variation of "Hey, handsome fella."
when we first started doing the podcast, David told me about Aerophile, and I'm on my laptop, and I go to Aerophile, and it's very much like YouTube itself. It goes and goes, and the next cool thing, and then the next thing I know, I look up and it's midnight, and I got to be at work at 6 a.m. So that's Aerophile right there.
I have over 600 videos in my Aerophile YouTube channel, so you can find a lot to watch if you want.
It is loaded. And Julien Martinson, tell us about your book that you have out now briefly, and let us know social media where folks can.
So recently I published a book called The Ultimate Guide to Careers in Aviation. So this is an ideal book, ideal for Gen Z who are just graduated from high school and who are looking for career options. And so this is the first touch point for careers in aviation. The book covers a brief overview of the history of aviation and what are the peak accomplishments are and where the industry is at today and where the industry is heading to. And we discuss 4 major career groups: pilot, air traffic control, aircraft engineering, and aviation management, which includes airport and airline management. And so we touch on a couple of those career paths and where you can study. And then the final chapter is about networking, career resume writing, and interviewing skills. So if you know anybody that's interested in exploring career options, they're good at math, they like a career that is globally interconnected, that is embraces diversity, inclusion, and it is innovative, then an aviation career is a possibility. And the book is available on Amazon and on multiple other ebook platforms.
Yeah, we have all these descriptions, all these wait a minute, let me redo that. We have all these links listed in the description below. Anyway,
Correct, correct.
we appreciate you being with us, Julian. And Dave Gorman, what have you had going on? You got
Well,
with
let's
your
see.
social
Yeah,
media?
I mentioned a couple of videos from the Morristown EAA fly-in with flagship Detroit, the DC-3, which was fantastic watching it again. Ain't Misbehaving, the locally based, East Tennessee based P-51, always fun to see. So a few of those, some things coming up. I'll be up in Kentucky this week for a nephew's wedding, and I'll do a report from the Aviation Heritage uh, museum that they have up there in Bowling Green. It's an outdoor venue. They have about I think they've added another plane. They have a what is it? A F-105 Thunder Chief that's on its way soon. So unfortunately, a lot of they're outside. I wish they'd get them undercover, but it still is a great, great place, and Bowling Green is awful proud to have it there. So I look forward to seeing the additions. They have a restoration shop that they've recently built, so they can keep those planes looking as good as they can right now.
Yeah, very much
So
the same.
I'll shoot some video and I'll put that up on my Gormania is my YouTube channel, and come by and visit. We have social media for this podcast as well, and try to keep things updated there. We're all over the place. We're not yet on what are we not on? We're not on what is it the kids love there, Dave?
TikTok,
Snap Snapchat. No, we're on TikTok
Snapchat.
now.
We're on TikTok. Yeah,
Oh,
we're not on
There
Snapchat. We have
and
not. Yeah.
thank goodness we have. So but yeah, lots of places you can connect with us, and we love hearing from our listeners. Any suggestions on upcoming episodes? Got 63 in the can. We're still going strong, so we haven't covered everything. We'd love to hear what you'd like to hear us talk about.
Yeah, and you mentioned outside aircraft. While I was on my vacation um, week before last, um, my Gulf Shores vacation, we drove up to the USS Alabama. A lot of outside aircraft there. I know,
yes, there are.
yeah, David Rowe was just there, which inspired my visit because I was going to be close. But yeah, if you get the opportunity to check out the USS Alabama, be prepared to spend a lot of time in this ship.
Yes, it's a battleship. It's big, and there's a lot of nooks and crannies to look at.
And a lot of small spaces to kind of nestle your way through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the stairs are the all. You even call those stairs, David? Are,
Well,
are are those stairs or ladders? I mean, what?
they're closer to a ladder than they are a stair. But
Mm-hmm.
again, you've got young kids running up and down these, not old folks like me. It's a little hard on my knees, but
Yeah.
yeah, they're
While we were there, there was a school trip there, so
oh yeah.
they were buck wild in that shit. But yeah, a lot of outside aircraft, a lot of cool stuff to see if you're ever down in Mobile. And by the way, there's a the best seafood restaurant in the world is right down the road from the USS Alabama, and it's the original Oyster House.
And we'd like to welcome the original Oyster House as a new sponsor of the history
Yeah,
of.
right.
Hey, it's worth a shot, right? Julie, we'll send you a couple dozen, okay, buddy?
Okay, sounds good. I look forward to it.
And yeah, you can find everything social media for the History of Aviation podcast. Every link we've mentioned is in the description box below. I enjoyed it, guys.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was fun. Good playing. Looking
And
forward
thank
to
you
the
so
next
much.
one.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank everybody
Ju
for it was great.
Julian, we need to do a Canadian design. It's been a little while.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's a good idea. I'll look up
Okay,
a good Canadian story for you guys.
let's do that, okay?
Hmm.
I'd enjoy it.
I like it. For David Rowe, Dave Gorman, and Julien Martinson. This is Derrick Beeler. Thanks for listening to the History of Aviation podcast.